Welcome back to Take It or Heave It. I'm Wes Soltis. This is Ryan Peters from HeaveMedia.com.
This is where we review 5 albums in 5 minutes, except now we're in high definition, which means that if you look closely, you can see the face of God in Wes's beard.
The first album we're going to look at is Scarlett Johansson, Anywhere I Lay My Head. It's on Atco. It was released on May 20th.
Anywhere I Lay My Head is the debut album for Johansson, and it's actually just a bunch of covers of Tom Waits songs. And, interestingly enough, she left her toothbrush at Wes's apartment last week.
I feel like the critics for this album have been a little overly harsh because it's not as bad of a record as some people have said. However, it's not a very good record. The music on it's kind of like a distorted album leaf, which is a good thing. The one thing that holds it back is Scarlett Johansson's voice, as it's kind of like a Sinead O'Connor-esque thing, and I'm not a big fan of Sinead O'Connor, so I'm going to definitely heave this album.
When I first heard that Scarlett Johansson was going to be releasing an album full of Tom Waits covers, I think my reaction was basically the same as everyone else's, which was to assume that it was going to be a train wreck. And it's not. And that's really the biggest compliment that I can give the album. It's not a train wreck. Johansson dives right into the songs. She somehow got David Bowie to sing on 2 of the tracks with her. But the big problem comes in that she doesn't rearrange the tracks enough to really make them her own. If you ask me, Tom Waits has one of the most original and really distinctive voices in pop music in the last 30 years. And so when you hear cover songs that sound too much like the originals of his songs, it just reminds you that you could be listening to Rain Dogs rather than listening to some hot actress try and replicate Rain Dogs. So it's not terrible, but I'm going to heave it.
The next record we're going to look at is Mudhoney with The Lucky Ones. It came out on Sub Pop Records on May 20th.
Mudhoney actually started out as a joke band that was formed before the original members could even play actual instruments, and it was called Mr. Epp and the Calculations, which lead singer Mark Arm named for a math teacher that he had at a suburban Seattle high school.
Over the last 20 years, Mudhoney has released 8 albums, and they've all kind of been the exact same. The difference on The Lucky Ones is that the guitars are a little more powerful and a little more jangly to give it kind of a different feel than the other 7. However, it's not different enough to make me a Mudhoney fan, and I've never really liked them to begin with, so I'm going to have to heave this album.
Mudhoney were really the fathers of the late 80s Seattle scene that started the grunge revolution. Bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden both cite Mudhoney as their biggest influence. And yet the ironic thing is that once grunge really took off, Mudhoney shied away from the spotlight, and they started recording garage rock and punk rock tunes rather than the grunge rock that was so popular at the time. So The Lucky Ones is kind of a mixed bag of all the other stuff that's come before in the whole Mudhoney canon. And I think it's fantastic. It's punked out, and it's funked out, and it's garage rocked out in the best way possible. I think the best track is the title track, which shows what the band sounds like when they play fast and furious and they don't give in. So if you like late 80s punk and kind of the garage rock sound from that time, I think you'll love the album. I'm definitely going to take it.
The next record we're going to look at is Tilly and the Wall with O. It comes out on June 17th on Teen Love Records.
Tilly and the Wall take their name from a children's book of the same title. We had a talk with them, and you can go to our HeaveMedia.com homepage, search Tilly and the Wall in interviews, and you can read what they had to say about it.
Through the first couple of albums, Tilly and the Wall was labeled as a gimmick band because of the tap dancing. They get away from that by using marching bands and horns and harmonies on this album that kind of puts tap dancing in the back seat. Another thing that they do on this album is cuss a lot. And the only thing that makes you cooler than cussing is smoking. So I'm definitely going to have to take this album.
Tilly and the Wall formed out of the ashes of many different bands from the Omaha scene, and they've toured with popular Omaha acts like Bright Eyes. And they're probably best known for the fact that they don't use an actual percussionist, they use tap dancers who dance on soundboards. It's really something interesting to see if you ever get a chance to see the band live. O kind of sounds like all their other albums. It's full of harmonized vocals, it's brimming with melody, and it's really upbeat. But the only problem, like all their other albums, is that it's way too short. But the nice part about the album is that it incorporates musical sounds and instruments that they didn't use before. There's lots of saxophone, there's more piano, there's different percussion sounds on it for once. So I think it's great. I wish that it was a little bit longer, but that's a minor complaint. I'm definitely going to take it.
Fourth album we're going to look at is Foxborough Hot Tubs with Stop, Drop, and Roll. It's out on Warner Records. Came out May 20th.
I got a secret for you about Foxborough Hot Tubs. Come here. Just a little bit closer. It's Green Day. And some other guys, but mostly Green Day.
You can't go into this expecting a Green Day album because you're going to be pretty disappointed. What this album gives you is 32 minutes of something that will remind you of watching That Thing You Do or listening to some early 60s British invasion. I think the album's great, it's fun, it's different, it's short, which is always good, I think. I'm definitely going to take this album.
Stop, Drop, and Roll just sounds like a more diverse version of Green Day. They use samples from music and from movies, they reference bands like the Stooges and Iggy Pop, but the music still bounces and tumbles and it's completely non-threatening garage rock. Kind of sounds like the Arctic Monkeys on Pixie Sticks. I think it's short, but it's worth listening to and it's interesting, so I'm going to take it.
The final record we're going to look at is Coldplay with Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends. It'll be out on Capitol Records on June 17th.
Coldplay went all artistic on us for their latest album. The cover for it is actually the Lady Liberty Leading the People. It's Eugene Delacroix's famous painting about the 1830 French Revolution. But the title, Viva La Vida, or Death and All His Friends, actually comes from a Frida Kahlo painting, and it means live life.
Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, was once quoted by saying that the Arcade Fire is the greatest band in existence, and you can really tell their influence on Viva La Vida. It also doesn't hurt to have Brian Eno pushing all the buttons on the board. I'm definitely going to have to take this.
Anybody disappointed by Coldplay's last album, X and Y, can breathe a sigh of relief because the new one, Viva La Vida, is actually fantastic. Where a lot of people had criticized the old album because it just sort of recycled the sounds that Coldplay had used on their first two. The new one, it incorporates a whole wide range of sounds. They recorded a lot of it in Spanish churches while they were touring Latin America. It's got Spanish beats, it's got Africanized beats, and in a weird way, it combines all of that with U2. In fact, the first track sounds a whole lot like Where the Streets Have No Name, where it's just a guitar intro for like 2 minutes. And it all comes together pretty beautifully. I think it's one of their better albums. I think it's really, really interesting, and it's definitely worth taking.
To recap, for Scarlett Johansson, Ryan and I both didn't think the album was as bad as it could have been, but we couldn't get past Johansson's voice. For Mudhoney, I thought it was boring and showed the band hasn't grown, but Ryan thought it was a great throwback to 80s punk and garage. For Foxborough Hot Tubs, we both thought it was fun, bouncy, and energetic. I loved the new sound on Tilly in the Wall, and so did Ryan, even though he wished it was longer. And as for Coldplay, I like the influence of the Arcade Fire, and Ryan liked the references to YouTube. That'll do it for this week's Take It or Heave It. For HeaveMedia.com, I'm Wes Soltis. This is Ryan Peters. Tune in next week where we'll review Barack and Roll, Barack Obama's new spoken word album. Si se puede!